Good morning, everyone. Before we hear from some interviews with some CEOs that run the companies that create the content and make the technology that gets that content from A to B, we're going to take a quick look at the emerging market of virtual reality that has the potential to change the way that we consume content. So in 2016, two major schools of thought have really evolved around the virtual reality market. First up, we've got those that think that VR is nothing more than a passing fad and it's pretty much dead on arrival. Then we've got the more hyper-bullish camp that thinks that VR shipments are going to take off overnight and we're going to see mainstream adoption essentially tomorrow. If we look at VR iterations of the past, it's pretty easy to side with the first camp. The first true virtual reality head-mounted display came around in 1960, and it's seen a lot of stutter steps in the years since. It's seen numerous iterations, it's seen red herrings. But if we take a look at this picture, we might be a little bit more likely to side with the second camp. But that also would be a misstep because we're not at this kind of mainstream adoption yet. So if we're past all of the goofy iterations of the ghosts of VR past, but we're not quite at mainstream adoption, where does that put us with VR in 2016? Is this the real deal? In answering that question, it's easy to get caught up in the hype around the market. So to answer this, we're going to take a quick look at three major stakeholders in this space and take some cues from them. First up, we've got investors. Investor spending is expected to hit $2.6 billion in 2016, which is a significant 271% growth over 2017. And we expect this investment to continue growing as the market starts generating serious revenue. Luckily, it looks like serious revenue is going to be generated this year. Deloitte expects 2016 to be the VR market's first ever $1 billion year. So investors are on board. But what about the developers who are tasked with creating the content and the platforms that makes VR worthwhile? Well, they're ready. They're retooling. According to a developer survey run by Yeti, 60% of developers were at least very familiar with the VR development process, and they're putting these skills to use. According to the Game Developers Conference, 3 in 4 developers were already creating content for at least one major VR or AR platform, and in many cases, they were creating content for more than one. And they're pretty optimistic that this retooling and this development is going to pay off in the near term. Going back to that Yeti survey, when they asked VR product developers how optimistic they were that virtual reality was going to enter the mainstream, the vast majority were at least very optimistic that VR would soon enter the mainstream. So developers are on board too. But what about consumers whose dollars and purchasing habits can really make or break this space? They're possibly the most important part of the puzzle. Well, it looks like they are also on board. According to an exclusive survey run by BI Intelligence of tech-savvy consumers in October 2016, 95% of respondents said that they were interested in trying VR. And notably, they were interested in trying a whole range of activities, not just gaming and entertainment. In fact, 1/4 of respondents said they were most interested in using VR to travel to a new location. And there's a lot of desire among those who haven't even tried it yet. 55% of respondents in that survey stated that they hadn't yet tried VR, and when we dug a little deeper and asked why they hadn't, 84% said it was simply because they hadn't had the opportunity to. And this is something we expect to be a self-solving problem. Although we don't expect headset shipments to be explosive overnight, we do expect 2016 and 2017 to be major foundational years where millions of headsets are shipped, bringing true VR to many consumers for the very first time. So we've got investors putting their money into the space, we've got developers creating the sorely needed content and perfecting those platforms, and we've got consumers who are really eager to give VR a try. That's why in 2016, for the first time, VR is not a stutter step, and the market that blossoms around it could potentially be enormous. Earlier this year, Goldman Sachs put out a report that said that in an accelerated uptake case, the combined VR/AR market, just in terms of headsets, would usurp that of TV and be on par with the laptop market in 2025. And even in a bear case, where we see a delayed uptake, they still have it outshadowing that of the game console market, which sees about a 40% penetration rate in the United States. So even though, thankfully, VR is not going to look like this, it is going to look like this. And in turn, it's capturing the money of investors, it's capturing the time of developers, and it's capturing the imagination of consumers. So even though it has a lot of work to do, and a lot of room to grow, VR is here and it's here to stay. And if you're interested in hearing more about some content opportunities and what's happening in the VR AR space, we encourage you to come to the BI Intelligence track this afternoon just across the hall in Tower Room East. Thank you so much.